Welcome, Rabbi Rakeffet, to our program called Meaningful Interviews with Rabbi Dalfin. It's wonderful to see you bright and early. And we've known each other for quite a while. And I want to focus on a few things that you've shared with me over the years. I really would like you to talk a little bit about it. And I'll ask, you answer, And your style of honesty, integrity has always been something that people look forward to, because there's so much bluff out there. And we're not going to go into that. But everyone knows that Rabbi Rakeffet was a Talmud Muvik of the Ravs, Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yasher Soloveitchik, that they'll get the truth, whether they like it or not, but they'll get the truth. And my program here is about, it's a no holds barred type of interview. We talk from the heart and let the chips fall where they fall. So I want to go back to your youth in the Bronx. Just for a few minutes, tell me a little bit about your upbringing in the Bronx.
You have to remember, I grew up in the Bronx. There were over 700,000 Jews, and I don't know if you had 10 families that were Shomer Shabbos. I had the fortune that my mother, got to remember, I'm a third generation American. My parents were born in Harlem. And my mother was one of 6 children, and she was the only one that really cared about Yiddishkeit. I can't say that she understood or was totally observant at that time, but she sort of with that already. When I started public school, first grade, I went to Cheder that year. Then I had a lot of hashgacha pratit, meaning the teacher, as I write about in my 7th book, which is, I call it a scholarly memoir, the teacher always had a problem with me. I would be wild, and she called for my mother and told her that, look, there's a third Irish kid, a third Italian, and a third Jews, and your son is too bright. But he learns in a half hour, takes the rest an hour, a week to learn. So she suggested that my mother transfer me to a parochial school where there'd be a dual curriculum. Min Shamayim Zikuni, that Salanti Yeshiva was 5 little blocks from my house. The only parochial school, day school, call it what you wish, in the Bronx. And beginning 2nd grade, I was in Salanta. By 7th grade, I had another great miracle, and that we owe to Simpo Sugihara, Seichet Tzadik Livracha, who saved the Mir Yeshiva. And in 47, part of the Mir came in Aliyah, and part went to America. And many needed Shidduchim, and then they needed Panasa. So all over the Yeshiva day schools, the few that they were, picked up a lot of Mira, the Shanghai crowd, we called them. So in 7th grade, my Rebbe in the morning was Rav Gershon Yankelovich. He didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak a word of Yiddish. In 8th grade, my Rebbe was Reb Henich Fishman, and I intend to dedicate my next book to Reb Henich's memory. He had a great, great impact on me. I was 12 years old. I was bar mitzvahed in his class, and he treated me like an adult. By that time already, basic Yiddish I knew, and Geret, Tzedischen sich, and had gewähnt the Nensen mein Haus. He lived near my house as well. He lived on Walton Avenue. I lived Washington. It was a 10-minute walk. I was there many Friday nights. And he introduced me to the problems of Shanghai, of going to Shanghai, going to Kobe, Japan. The whole question, should you listen and take the false visas from Sempo Sugihara, introduced me to that problem, introduced me to the problem of international dateline, how some of his friends were worried about Yom Kippur, and they didn't want to leave for fear would they have to observe 1 day, 2 days, the whole machlekes, which I've lectured on extensively, and they died afterwards. They stayed behind, and by after Sukkot, you couldn't get out. The Nazis had come in, and that was the end. And And then I was a very bright kid, and I was accepted in Bronx High School of Science. That's, at that time, for every Jewish boy and girl, Bronx High School of Science. And he said to me, ich trage noch nicht, man darf nicht überlassen nach Yeshiva, man darf learn in Gemara. He said, you're not ready yet to go into the big world. And I said, but why MTA? Why you? The high school is already after interviews. He'll arrange it. And a week later, I was sitting in front of Rav Mendel Sachs, the Chafetz Chaim's son-in-law. I write about it in Washington. Sag a bissel Rassi. And ich habe nicht verstanden, was meint. Rassi, was ist Rassi? And a fellow named Berman, who later went on to become a principal in a Beit Yaakov, he was waiting for a Bechina to get into the Rav Shia, and he leaned over and said to me, Rabbi Sachs means Rashi. Uva Gula, the Geula came, and I read Rashi. I got into the second year, actually, and I always was a year ahead of myself. In other words, when I was already in fourth year high school, I was in a college year of Noach Born. I was always a year ahead of myself of Noach Bornstein. And as they say, the rest is history. I also have to mention that the Bnei Akiva also had a big influence on me. In other words, I'm not about Shuvah in that sense, because from the age of 11, I was totally frum. And I always say about Shuvah has to destroy a world and rebuild a new world. Yeah. My world was always Torah. But the yeshiva was the yeshiva. Where do you get an atmosphere in Shabbos? And I used to walk, I didn't walk, my walk was like 20 minutes at the other end of Crotona Park. You have to know the Bronx, these areas you can't walk in by day today, let alone at night. And at the end of Crotona Park was Kilat Israel, was a big shul, Rabbi Dr. Asher Ziv. And that's where Bnei Akiva met. And Bnei Akiva was a tremendous influence. I can mention Rabbi Avram Silbit, Seichet Tzadik Livracha, Meir Kahana. He was Rosh Ken, I was Sgan Rosh Ken. There were women gedolot, Nashim gedolot. I'll give you one name you know, Miriam Beinhorn Levinger, the lady who built Yehuda V'Shomron, Chevron. You have no idea what idealism there was in Bnei Akiva at that time. Also, I have to say, I got to know Brooklyn. We would, Saturday night during the winter, on Tuesday, we would go to the Ken, we'd meet during the week, bring money for car fare, leave it there. And when there was a long Motzai Shabbos, we went to Williamsburg, we went to Crown Heights. Crown Heights then was, Lubavitch was just beginning. It was then Rabbi Kanatopsky, Rabbi Baumo, and what an experience. Reb Lezer Waldman was the same age as me, the same shavit. We became friendly. He was Brooklyn, I was Bronx. It was a wonderful experience. The greatest gift I got was my wife. She walked very far to come to Bnei Akiva. She lived further up in the Bronx, more north, in a better area. And she stammt on her father's side from Belzer Chassidim. Her father was a yingel in Belz with payas and other works. And her grandfather, they went to Vienna, the usual story. They got to America after World War I. And her grandparents remained Shomer Shabbos 100%. And her mother's family is in America from the 1870s. In Queens and Mount Hebron, Malka has great-great-grandparents buried there. You can imagine what I'm talking about. And they were 100% from. Not only that, part of the family were Malachim. The famous delicatessen that Rabbi Gifter said I would go to hear of Yitzchak Sher's Musashmusin when he was in America on the East Side, not to hear him, because after the shir, we used to go to Sohn's delicatessen for the vush, for the salami, the hot dog. And he was a malach. And that's Malka's great uncle. Malka's is named after his sister, Malka, and his sister also married a rabbi. She was Malka Barish, Malka Sohn Barish. Malka's mother was a son. When she married, she became a grund. And she was a son from her mother's side. On her father's side, she was Brill. I mean, it's unbelievable. And her mother was always a Torah mitzvah.
Thank you. I want to ask you now. So then you meet the Rav. You come to the Rav. I want to really talk for a few minutes now about that experience. I mean, in researching my book, The Rav and the Rebbe, which you so kindly endorsed, it opened up for me. I want to tell you, it opened up a new world, and I banged myself that I could have gone to listen to some of the shiurim because in the 70s I was a young bacher, but no one told me, and I missed out a great opportunity. But I learned so much from researching him, and you had the schus of being a Talmud Muvik of his, literally. I mean, maybe the Talmud Muvik,
Rabbi Lichtenstein is the Talmud Muvhak.
Okay.
And then we have another Kodereya, Repeshel Shechter.
But Rabbi, with full modesty, you're from that Shavit. Okay?
Right.
So I want you for a few minutes to give our listeners and viewers a picture of who the Rav was, what it meant to be in a shiur, and his vision, his world vision. And then I want to get to the real issue that we have to talk about is why the right-wing Orthodox world did not accept him, even though, in my humble opinion, I think you'll agree, he was probably the greatest Torah scholar in Gemara and Rambam in the last 100 years, more than the biggest Rosh Yeshiva. And I interviewed people. I interviewed Talmidei Chachamim, and who are not, necessarily graduates of why that, and then they agreed, with their head to the right or the left, But the Rabbi Yashaber's mind and hasbara and articulation is phenomenal. I mean, I just listened to a tape of his they have online, and I'm mesmerized. I can hours. I could just listen for hours to him, and that's his drushes. And you were zeichet not only to his drushes, but to his pilpul and his scholarship. So please address that.
Okay, so let me begin at the beginning. Libi chashka b'Torah, and to me, to learn a daf Gemara was the greatest joy and remains the greatest joy of my life. I mean, we're talking now at 7:16. I can tell you 4:00 this morning already, my Gemara was open, and that's every day. Before I daven and everything. So I really wanted to go to Lakewood. Lakewood was a tremendous attraction, and I have to tell you, I became quite close to Baron Kotler. I have many stories. It's not for now. And I was learning in Lakewood, and I wanted to stay. And my parents were hysterical that I won't go to college. So I made a deal, one of those deals. Look, I'll give YU a try. And if I don't like it, I can go back to Lakewood. My parents agreed. I write about this in Washington. The first college lecture, September 55, is a young man, his first lecture in YU, Feldman, Professor Louis Feldman. And I come into the lectures, Zeichet Tzadik Levracha, Louis and Miriam, great people. I come into the lecture, and he gives out sheets about the Hammurabi Code, and can we prove the Torah scientifically? What do we value more, tradition, science? And I looked at it, I figured they're called Chazal Potkin Tachtai Pitrei Gehenim, like with Yitzchak Avinu. Wow, what's going to be? Well, this man walks in, a Harvard graduate, had taught in Trinity College before, and he gives a lecture. That lecture on the Sheva Mitzvot, what he showed, I have quoted that lecture at least 1,000 plus times in my 62 years of teaching Torah. So with that lecture, I was the happiest person in the world in YU. Here I had in the morning of Shmuel Leizavok tells, and 2 years later, I led a petition that we want to learn by the Rav. We were chutzpahniks, we were kids. How old was I? A sophomore in college. But no Rebbe is good enough for me. We got to have the Rav. And the Rav was then only teaching postgraduate smicha. So I give Rav Shmuel Belkin credit. He sat down with the Rav. You know, they had a relationship going back to the Rav's first day in America, basically, because Shmuel Belkin got here 28, 29, 28 to Canada, 29 to New York, and the Rav got here in 32, to America in 32. And Rav Shmuel Belkin actually taught for him in Boston. So the Rav agreed to give a college class, and that's what he did for many, many years. There was a shiur Tuesday, Wednesday, the first year with the college kids who at 3 o'clock went to college, and there would be a shiur afterwards in halacha. How the Rav had all that energy, was still in his prime. And I have to tell you, we learned Sanhedrin with the Rav. It's the famous Sanhedrin shiur that everyone talks about. That's the He basically taught what he didn't know. That's what he taught me to do. And all my life, I've taught what I don't know. He said, it doesn't matter what the Talmidim know or don't know. Whatever you will teach them will be new material. But for you, you got to keep on going and conquering and new material. Now, he taught Sanhedrin. Mr. Abrams called me over, the dean of the yeshiva, the man who ran it, the Menachel, and the legendary Mr. Norman B. Abrams, the son of the Lamsha Mashkiach, Rav Avram Pachta, and he changed his name from Pachta to Abrams in honor of his father, and it's a better name in America, Abrams, than Pachta. So he called me over and he says to me, Arnold, that was my Christian name, Arnold, do you know that Rosh Yeshiva complaining to me they never learned Sanhedrin in Kells and Slapotka, and now they're going to give shiur because of the Rav. If he's teaching Sanhedrin, the whole Yeshiva has to teach. And that was an eye-opener for me. And all my life, the Rebbe told me later, always teach what you don't know. You will gain and the Talmidim will gain. If you teach what you know, they will gain, but you won't gain. So it was an experience. As you know, it's legendary. He could teach the same thing 20 years apart. And it was a machlekes with the Chazon Ish and Zrayim. 20 years later, he gives the Chazon Ish his pshat. By the way, Professor Brown writes about this in his fabulous doctorate on the Chazon Ish, 900 plus pages. So a Talmud says, Rebbe, 20 years ago, it's reported you differed with the Chazon Ish. That's what I thought then. Now I've rethought it, and this is my approach. And if I agree with Chazon Ish, wonderful. And the intellectual honesty was overwhelming. What was interesting about the classroom was there was tension. He was not Boston. We got a Talmud joined the class from Boston, Yitz Rubin. He happens to be, we're like this until today. He's my own Talmud. He was, from the day he retired, he hasn't missed a shiur in 15 plus years in Gris. And the day he retired, can you hold on one second? Tana, I'm being interviewed for the States. I must talk with you later, okay? Oh, I'm leaving for the dentist 11:30. Okay, bye-bye, honey, bye-bye. Family responsibilities. I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren en masse coming over today. Yeah, there was tension in the classroom because it's very demanding in New York. Yitz Rubin comes from Boston. He was a Maimonides graduate, and boy, it's a different Rav. He says, I can't believe what's going on here. But in the classroom, he had top minds, and he wanted you to be tops to the second power. Very demanding. And as Rabbi Norman Lamb said in his eulogy of the Rav, he said, it's not the way to teach, but somehow it worked. Now, I have to tell you, in my classroom, it's just the opposite. And one time, an old-time Talmud of the Rav, I hope he's alive, Rav Yishmael Cohen, if the name means anything to you, he was from South America. His father was a Rav in South America. He was older than I am, and he came in Aliyah much earlier. When we came 53 years ago, he was working for the Misrada Datot already here a number of years. So he came to my class, it's many years ago, because he heard why you was beginning here, Gris. And at the end of the class, he broke into tears and he said, "Can I say a few words to the students?" And he said, "You don't know how lucky you are." He says, "You just heard a beautiful shir, but the Rebbe, there's no tension here." He says, and he broke into tears. He said, "Why couldn't it be this way when we studied by the Rav?" So, Baruch Hashem, that was the Rav, and you didn't walk in unprepared. Now, what was beautiful about the Rav, and I've told this to my Talmidim many, many times over, and I got to know the Rav personally. We remained very close till he took ill and alone was able to function. We had a correspondence. From the time I came in Aliyah, we corresponded in letters. I went to see him when I was in America a number of times. The Rav remained the Rav. Then I did my research, and I even got to know the Rav much, much better. And you see what characterized the Rav in Lakewood, it was Lakewood, nothing else. I write about this. I once bought a New York Times. I have a student sitting in front of me who left Lakewood and became a Talmud Mufak of mine. And he just told me that the story I tell about, I left the New York Times on my bed on Friday after the morning Seder. The afternoon was off. I wanted to look at the New York Times. It was 1953, 54. And I come back, it's ripped up in the garbage. He said he was kicked out of Lakewood because they caught him reading a New York Times. It was the terrorist attack in Israel, talking about 20 years ago when Lo Aleinu, it was terrible here with buses blowing up. And he wanted to read, and they snitched on him to the Rosh Yeshiva. So you see with the Rav, I'll characterize the Rav very simply. He was a brisker giant who happily lived in the Western world. There was no conflict. You felt totally at home. The shir ended, you went upstairs to college, no contradiction, totally at home. It's the Western world. Whether the Rav would have believed this was absolutely necessary, all right, I make a living out of my lectures on comparing the Rav to Rav Shimshon Hirsch. Rav Shimshon Hirsch, it was certainly a lachatchila that God commanded, Torah derech eretz. A Jew has to live and conquer the world, and Torah will succeed in every civilization. I'm not certain the Rav held like this. Look at my second volume where I quote Rebbe, where he explains the difference between himself and Rav Hirsch. The Rav was a brisker. Maybe in an ideal world, we don't have to step out of the tent of Torah. But the Rav said it is a necessity. It is a reality today. We have to live with dignity. Read his essay, Ish Halacha, Milu et haaretz v'kivshuha. And there was no contradiction. You wanted to be a Rav, you wanted to be a Rosh Yeshiva, fabulous. You wanted to go into medicine, fine. You wanted to be a lawyer, no contradiction. You wanted to go into academics, but the basis is Torah and Yirat Shamayim. And I remember when HaRav Yosef came back from the first time he visited America and traveled Kila to Kila, he told me who he pa'el. Wherever he went, there were people, professionals, lawyers, academic people, medical doctors, and they have shiurim on the highest level in Shas and Paiskim. And he said they were all Talmud Rav Soloveitchik. So see, this is the Rav.
So do you believe that the Rav believed that his Talmidim were on par with the Slabodka Talmidim of Slabodka?
The Rav used to boast that I have Talmidim that would have been famous even in Volozhin.
Okay.
I don't agree with him, but Baruch Hashem. But I have to tell you, look, the proof of the pudding is I give shir in Gris. People are listening to me in Lakewood, in Ner Yisrael, you name the yeshiva. I'm not talking YU I have the least following because they have Baruch Hashem, Reb Heschel Shechter, Reb Mordechai Willig. People, I was honored by Lakewood. I don't have to tell you what Chabad thinks of me. Reb Label Groner, Zeichet Tzadik Livracha. So it shows you we're on a level. Baruch Hashem.
Now, I want to go to a remark you told me that I still, my head's spinning from it. 1967, the Rav lost, I believe, 3 of his closest people: his wife, his brother, and his mother.
You're going in the wrong order. His mother, his brother, and his wife.
Thank you. The Rebbe sent a mishlachas, a group of Hasidim, I think Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, Rabbi Yisrael Jacobs, and a few elder Hasidim,
right,
to be Menachem Ovel. And you told me you were there at the time, and when they left, the Rav made a comment. I'd like you to repeat that because it's a phenomenal comment and a great insight.
No, the Rav, first of all, I was the only one there. It was early. The story was I already was a Rosh Yeshiva in YU from 62 on until I came in Aliyah in 69. I'm still teaching on the Reach faculty, but then I taught Shas and Paiskim. Today, I teach myself Kol Torah Kula on Sunday, and I play games with Torah history on Monday. But I must be doing well in the games because I have a lot of wonderful students all over the world. Baruch Hashem. So why was I there so early? Because I was teaching kids from that I gave shir at 11:30, I believe it was 11:30. So I told the Talmidim, look, I'm going across the street. The Rebbe was sitting shiva in his mother's house across the street, Amsterdam Avenue. And I said, I want to be Menachem over my Rebbe, and you sit b'chavrota. So I went across the street, and I was there with the Rebbe. It was 9 o'clock, actually. And, it's America, not Israel. In Israel, 9 o'clock already is the middle of the day. In America, still, it's early. And there's a knock on the door, and I say, Rebbe, I'll get it. I run over to the door, and I saw 2 Jews with the longest beards I ever saw in my life. Later, I learned I became very close to Rabbi Gordon's son, Rav Shalom Ber Gordon. We rabbinated together in the Newark area. And they came in and they said to the Rav, this was all in Yiddish, and he said to the Rav, Rebbe, the Rav weiß, as the Rebbe verlässt nicht the Eastern 770, the Rebbe doesn't leave, and we're his shluchim coming, lenachem aval, etc. And the Rav, he broke into a big smile, and they started talking about the Alter Heim and the Rav and his experience in Chaslevich and Chabad. And then he started talking about the Rebbe in Berlin and their relationship. When they left, the Rav turned to me and he was very emotional. You could see, when the Rav told the story, he relived it. I quote the Rav in my published works on him, that people don't have to have image memories and that people have event memories. Image memories, they remember dimly. An event memory is something you relive. He spoke about the difference between a man and a woman. When a man talks about my daughter just called, so she was a little girl, he dimly remembers. His wife will tell you the shoes she was wearing in this picture when she was 2 years old, where she bought the shoes, how the daughter reacted, where she got that's an event memory. The Rav relived Berlin, the Rebbe, and then he said to me, there was a big difference between us. No one knew who I was. He says, you come, I was dressed, I looked like everyone else, clean shaven, and the chup, the pictures of the Rav, a young man in the prime of life, Western dress. The Rebbe, everyone knew Kishem Hashem Nikra Halav. It was just beautiful. His dress, his deportment, his heritage, his ancestors. It was overwhelming to hear the Rav describe who he was married to, his father-in-law. Everyone knew who he was. Now, then later we learned that the Rav was, one time the Rebbe came to visit him in his apartment, and the Rav offered him, lekach and a drink, and the Rebbe didn't, and wouldn't take. And then the Rav learned that twice a week the Rebbe was fasting. And these were days that he didn't eat or drink, Monday, Thursdays, I would imagine. And Rebbe later learned that the Rebbe had a key to the mikveh, that he could go and be toivel. Chassan has to go every day. And there was a beautiful, I would say, emotion of the feeling between two individuals who became the greatest representatives of Torah, of the Hasidic world and the literature world in modern times. And
so go back now to what I asked you earlier. You didn't address it yet. Why didn't the right-wing Orthodox Yeshiva world embrace the Rav?
Look, the right-wing Yeshiva world has made many hashkafic mistakes along the way. The state of Israel would be very different if we had made the right decisions 120, 130 years ago. Whenever people criticize the state of Israel, I smack their face and say, we have these problems because you're not here. If you'd be here, be a different state. You come, your ballot is your bullet. Everyone can vote here. Vote properly. I personally don't care, vote. I vote Mizrahi, vote Aguda, vote Shas, but vote properly. Vote for a party that will guarantee that this will be a Jewish state. I need not tell you what we're suffering right now with the new government. Not that Bennett is a Kiddush Hashem, wears a kippah, puts on tefillin every day, is a Shemesh Shabbos. We've never had a prime minister that was a total shomer halacha like Naftali Bennett, his wife and children. But on the other hand, he created a government where you have to repri every other day. You know, the Panovich Rav of Agudat Yisrael wanted him to head the ticket of Aguda. And he said, I'm not rich enough to be in the Knesset. They undercooked them. What do you mean? What are you talking? He says, to be in the Knesset and hear Meirav Michaeli speak, for instance, you got to repri, you're on the spot. I don't have enough money to buy a new suit every day. So had we made the right decisions, it would have been a different Israel. The same, look, with the Rav, it's the same story. You've heard me speak more than once. I plead with my students. I plead with my family, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren already, not to have enmity towards the Haredim. I have a terrible problem in Israel, the army. I don't have to elaborate now. If you're really a from Jew, you should walk with placards, kick the Machalale Shabbos out of the army. The Gemara in Saita, Mem Dalet, Mem Hey, the Mishnah, the Rambam, Perik Zayin, Hilchot Malachim, kick a Machalal Shabbos out of the army. But we know the problems. But I explained to them, look, the Haredim, so-called, it's a non-prejudiced term today, a non-pejorative term. Haredim are worried stiff. They look at what became of the Ashkenazic Jew left the ghetto. Look what became of us. Millions of non-Jews, including many that have been in the American government. Look at the government today. Look at Biden's family, all married to Jews. These are Jews. Look at the Secretary of State. Look at the ambassador to Israel. The chutzpah to pick an ambassador who's intermarried and is proud of it. The children are non-Jews. God have mercy. The Haredim are frightened. Rav Shach used to say privately about the Rav. Rav Shach couldn't deny he was, as you said, the greatest literature going in the 20th century. But Rav Shach would say, can leben in zwei Welt, mir kennen nicht. He can live in two worlds, we can't. Now, this is why the Rav in America, you educate a kid, don't go to college. Don't go to college. Well, the world, the living, panasa, dignity. All right, they do it, but we can't risk it. We can't take the chance. In Israel, the problem is much greater because number one, it's a Jewish state. If we're not going to be the doctors, the dentists, the nurses, the army, the professionals, the bankers, etc., who will be? Number two, you got to remember you're living in Brooklyn. When you take off your tefillin, everything you do is not a mitzvah. I'm living in Israel. Everything I do is binyan eretz Yisrael. According to the Rambam, one of the Taryag mitzvah, Yishuv eretz Yisrael. So we have a great challenge. I say the YU world, people like myself, like my children, my grandchildren, many of my students, we have to set the example that one can leave the ghetto, as if to speak, and be a gon, a tzaddik, a chassid, and contribute to the big world, live in dignity. I give you a simple example of what we're talking about. I'm sitting here in my office in Grus. You see here a picture that does it show my finger? That picture, that's my grandson, who's an artist, a graduate of B'Tzalel, and a fabulous young man, just married, was just Masada Kedushin this past year, and did a picture for me of his mafaked in the army, and it's like the mafaked is talking to me that he's proud that he can combine the army with Torah. And it's not easy, and it takes a long time for the world to adjust. Now, let me just say one more thing. In America, you're adjusting. You've come up with so many different systems how to go to yeshiva and go to the computer, take a few college courses, and get a degree. At one time, Ner Yisrael was unique. They had to deal with Johns Hopkins. Rebbe Yitzvei was not happy with Ner Yisrael, not happy with Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. Today, every last yeshiva is doing it. I had a Talmud heard me speak, must be 15 years ago. It was in Mir Yeshiva, very prominent Lakewood family, very prominent. Shem Dov, I don't want to mention the name, but a Shem Dover in Lakewood. And he heard me speak, made up his mind he's going to be my Talmud. You got to know who we're dealing with. He made up his mind. He's going to conquer the world. So he calls YU. He wants to go to Gris Kolev. They say, do you have a college degree? He says, no. He said, Gris Kolev, you must have a college degree. 1 year later, he has a college degree, became my Talmud Mufak, studied with me many years. Then after he got smicha, he went back to Mir, and I went to visit him in Mir, and he showed me around, and there were many Talmudim there who listened to me via YU Torah. And then I get a gift, a cup, which is on my desk, the water I drink when I give shiur, and there's a picture of my dear Talmud and yours truly standing in front of it. It says Yeshivat Mir Yerushalayim, the entrance, and on the cup he quotes the Mishnah in Makkot, Ha-Talmud Shegala Maglin et Harav Shelo, and like I'm in Gullus and Mir, but you know it's a play on words, because when I walk into Mir, it's Reb Henoch Fishman. He's alive. He's there. What a wonderful experience, man! I can tell you more than that. I have prepared Sherm. I've been teaching Torah for 62 years. If the Rebbe Shalom would be kind to me, I need another 60 years. What I have prepared for the Monday class on Eastern Europe, and it's all the result of Reb Geshen Yankelovich, my 7th year Rebbe, and my 8th year Rebbe.
So, Rabbi, I want to now go turn now to another issue. So, over your years, we've spoken about this. I don't know if it actually happened, but you had a very strong passion and desire that they start teaching somehow Chasidus at Yeshiva University. You told me about this, and then Rabbi Moshe Weinberger became a mashpia there. I don't know if that's a result of your efforts, but or not. But I think you once told me that, like, you know, Chasidus and Hasidim have won. You made such a comment to me once, like, but you know, you're a deep person. You're not a shallow person. So, what is it that you see in Chasidus? And it's not just Chabad Chasidus; it's Hasidism of the Baal Shem Tov. What is it that you see in it that you feel can be helpful to today's YU students and Yidentum Judaism and students today, and how does Lubavitch play a role in that?
Okay, I have to tell you, you're touching upon something that motivates me very deeply. And let me go back to my earliest years. I get off the bus on Amsterdam Avenue in Washington Heights, coming up from the Bronx, And I walk for 3-4 minutes. And here I am, an American kid, English, baseball, Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, and usual Hagadolim Shabaretz. And I open up the door of the yeshiva, and within a second, mein Sprach geht zu Yiddish, and ich darf reden Yiddish, ich darf verstehen Yiddish. And here I am, 1 minute later, there's Reb Mendel Zaks, the Chafetz Chaim son-in-law. There's Mori Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik, an anical from Brisker of Reb Chaim. I walk a few feet, there's Reb Shmuel Leizer Volk, the Telzer, as Gevenach, he was a Chavruta with the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva's son, Reb Azriel Rabinovich, Reb Chaim Rabinovich's son. One time he said that he was calling Reb Chaim, says, Vem menich Reb Chaim? I said, Reb Chaim Brisker, he cut my head off. Reb Chaim Brisker? It's nothing. Reb Chaim Rabinovich, Reb Chaim Telzer. So it was a different world, and I loved it. And that's what attracted me, the Rav, the learning. Tell me, would that attract the youngster today? And we're talking, by the way, Israel is much more important to me than America, obviously. Here we have the same problem. Would that attract the youngster today? So I'm going to give a big talk on this on April 4th. My talk is entitled, it's a special event, BMT, the institution that changed the Anglo-Torah world. And you have to know Dodo V'Doshav, okay? How do we reach out? Now, today, in my humble opinion, you must have emotion. You can't just depend upon intellect and learning. And more than that, not everyone has such a deep intellect. We have to reach out to them, to Amcha Yisrael. And you get to Baruch Hashem, in Israel, we have thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of students. I'm talking in the Torah world, and I'm talking in my Torah world, the Mizrahi Torah world. You have different institutions. But the Western world is such a challenge. The computer, it's a global village. The woke society, what I call the retrogressives. I don't want to use the word progressives. We are being hit so hard. Statistics show that Litvakim who survived the Holocaust have a much higher percentage of assimilation than the Hasidim who survived the Holocaust. I can tell you what you may or may not know, but Malka's relative, my wife's relatives told me, they went to the pier to greet the sixth Rebbe when he arrived in 1940. There were advertisements that Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the sixth Rebbe, is coming, etc. And remember, he was in a wheelchair. And when they wheeled him down the gangplank and he reaches the shore, there were a few thousand people there. People started to cry. And they struck up a Chabad niggin, one of the Rebbe's niggins from the Alter Rebbe, one of the 10 nigunim. And they signed, my wife's cousin told me this with tears in his eyes. And later I read it in memoir literature. And people, Americans who were raised in Chabad, Mechalelei Shabbos, they became Shomrei Shabbos on the spot. The Rebbe is done in America. We have to become good Jews. I say that's the emotion that they had from Chasidus. Now, I want to make a comment. This was told to me too. The women, when they came home and told their wives they're not going to work, they said, you do what you want, but we're not giving up our 10 o'clock every Shabbos we have at the hairdresser. Saturday night, they used to go out to the movies. You don't remember that, America. There was no TV and no computer. You went to the movies, the Palace, the IKEA Palace, etc. And they have to have their hair looking nice. They didn't go, you know when they gave up the appointments? When their kids were going already to Yeshiva and the kid came home, Mama, we're embarrassed. what a wife will do for a husband is a lot less than she'll do for a child. That's from the so you see that emotion. Now I want to tell you something. In my research, I came across Tomchei Tamimim. You know, that was the first real Chasidus yeshiva, not just Menzitzten and Kleisman, Lerend, you know, from Haif and here and there. It was desultory. It wasn't organized. This was real organization, organized, 1897, I believe, by the Rashab, and he saw at times it changing. So what it meant, the Hasidic yeshiva, the first hour they learned Chasidus, then it was a regular yeshiva. Give me a name of a graduate, some of the graduates, no? Rabbi Yosef Reisen, the rocket shopper. What, he couldn't learn at Nishki can't learn him? You follow? He was a graduate. I knew a Rabbi Nathan Zuber. Did you know Rabbi Nathan Zuber?
I met him once, yes.
I sat with him on Batei Dinim. He was good friends with Rabbi Teitz, and Rabbi Teitz was my role model. Remember, I'm in the rabbinate. I was a Rebbe and in the rabbinate. Bucky and Shas. And by the way, he used to boast that the Rashab was very upset with him because he wrote a tshuva, and Nathan wrote a tshuva that you're allowed to shave. So the Rashab says to me, when I first met him, he says, my greatest compliment I ever got, the Rashab said to me, Karen and lernen kennst du, aber asheget's bist du. And by the way, great family of his have been in touch with me. Listen, like, that's correct. He used to boast to everyone. So I told my Talmidim I had the same thing. In the 50s, I said a svara in class, and the Rebbe says to me, "Was binst du, a Reform rabbi?" And the whole class is laughing. It came up on a tape. I played the tape. They sent me the tape, and I played it here in class. And I said, I'm very proud. That shows the Rebbe thought of me, that he had enough to put me down. But if he doesn't think of you, why should he put you down? You're nothing to begin with. You're a Reform rabbi. But I said, my classmates laughed too much because later in the Shia, there were no Efshe come in and say, he sort of backed off a little bit. That what I said had a little force. But this is why I feel YU has so many different divisions. Frankly, I'm not happy with all the divisions. Kids wander around on campus without kippah. This has already been public knowledge. I saw it with my own eyes when YU brought me back and honored me a few years ago. But kids wander around without kippah. They come YU, they come with the Israelis, they're French, and it's been commentators written about it. Imagine in addition to the yeshiva program and the Beis Medrash program and the Jewish studies program. So we had a Tomchei Tamimim program, 1 hour, Chasidut, Tanya, Likutei Torah, Reb Nachman Breslov, some of the Sfarim. You can take other classics from, but the Chabad and Reb Nachman, that's what's widely studied, I can tell you, in Israel. And have a division. You'll have to build a mikveh. Where I'm sitting right here, and next door is Machon Lev. You know Machon Lev,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
You know that they built a state-of-the-art mikveh. Do you know why? Because they have hundreds of chassidim coming to Machon Lev, and they have to go to mikveh every day. So why you to build a mikveh? The New York Times can choke. Let them write about the mikveh. Let Jewish Week write about the mikveh. Why you builds a state-of-the-art mikveh? I'm sure they can get a donor within minutes. And I hold to it at a lot to the campus. And if they're Amish Chassidim, there'll be a little bit outreach. What's wrong? Outreach. We need it.
So why haven't they accepted your idea?
Unfortunately, some of the key faculty members have a very different opinion about Hasidut. I can tell you I had a big argument. I don't want to mention names. They're people I grew up with and love, and they're, intellectual friends, and we share a lifetime together. So right here in the Beis Medrash, must be 20 years ago, they were, I don't want to embarrass Chabad, I don't want to quote what they said, and they're arguing with me. And we had a big argument, all the students heard. And then they go back to America, and I hear they lost out. So my students said, lost out on a communal level, not in YU. YU, they control. They're the
Right.
Golden Israel there. And so my students said, Rebbe, you won. I said, gentlemen, I didn't win anything. Kesef, Hakol is Kesef, money. Nishi yeshlo meya, yeshlo deya. So they looked at me, what do you mean? It's a kesef, it's a chachma. No one could. I said, gentlemen, they went back and it reached the OU, Kashrut, that they have a problem with the Chabadnikim, Messianists. So they were told, this is what I'm told by Rav Menachem Genak, if we don't accept mashgichim from the Hasidic world, meaning namely Chabad, you can close the OU down. All right. Azevite nicht. You follow?
Yeah.
That far they can't go. But I want to tell you, it is very thwarting and frustrating to me. I spoke, the new president is my own Talmud, Rabbi Berman, but with all due respects to Rakeffet, he doesn't carry influence in Washington Heights, and nothing has happened. And I think, by the way, on a financial level, it ultimately will bring in a lot more funding for Yeshiva University. Okay.
But let's conclude. We have another 5 minutes. Let me conclude with the question and issue. What do you see Lubavitch today? You've seen Lubavitch Chabad in its infancy. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You're from the end of the 30s, 40s, 50s.
You don't even start to understand what's been going on from this very office the last few days. I think, again, I get very upset that people quote my Monday class and hear me Sunday, Shas, Paiskim, Shelet, and Shuvah. It's a world going on there. But the Monday class is more attractive because you don't need a background. The Sunday class, if you have 1,000 daf gemara under your belt, it's a lot easier to follow me. But the Monday class, every Tom, Dick, and Harry can come in and be a Talmud Muvhak. So right now I'm in the history of Torah in the modern world. It's about the 12th, in the Western world, it's about the 12th year, and I'm on Satmar now. So I'm this coming Monday, I'm actually going to quote the Satmar from Vayol Moshe, where he quotes the Rashab, and it's well known that Chabad were exactly anti-Zionist like Satmar. So I made the statement more than once that the Chabad may be anti-Zionist. It's true, they don't sing HaTikva. No one has really changed formally the position of the Rashab and what he published in public volumes in 120, 30 years ago against Zionism. I said, but the Rebbe is the greatest Zionist in the world. And a Talmud of mine, a dear Talmud, a son of a Talmud, very prominent in Israel. He takes issue with me, writes to me once, writes to me twice. He's on screen, but no one can talk while I'm teaching. It's only after, but he's on screen and the Zoom. And how can you say in Chabad this, that? So I answered, and a Chabadnik listening from, I guess, your area, Brooklyn. That's the whole thing with emails. You don't know where it's coming from. But he's been in touch with me, listening. He sends me a link to a talk that Yehuda Avner gave at a Shluchim conference. It must be 12, 13 years ago. I think it was 2008, if I recall. And Yehuda Avner, by the way, I taught his daughter in Rechavia. I'm not a stranger to the family. And he was the ambassador to England, and he's an English Jew, a Shema Torah mitzvah, but a fine English Jewish gentleman living in Israel many years, and he was very high, working an advisor of Begin and Barak and Rabin, you name him, he was involved. An ambassador to England, the Queen said to him, I can't understand how someone who speaks the Queen's English cannot live in England, how you choose Israel over England. And in his talk at the Shluchim conference, he gets hysterical Yes, Chabad is technically not Zionist, but the greatest Zionist we ever had was the seventh Rebbe. And he goes on to tell stories that even Yitzhak Rabin was blown away. Yeah, Rabin, he took Rabin. Rabin said, what am I going for? What do I have to do with these black-hatted people? And he walked out of there. I can't believe what that man knows. He says, the average Chavre Knesset in Israel doesn't know what's going on in Israel as well as the Rebbe. And I don't have to tell you, today Chabad, why you came up in class, look what Chabad is doing around the world, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Chabad. It's unbelievable what one man, the seventh Rebbe, created.
Yeah. About it, we're going to have to stop. I do want to continue at another time in Mitzvah Hashem because it's phenomenal. And Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe should bless you, should be young and energetic, and your mind should work, be sharp, and your memory, because you have, when I hear you and I talk to you, I love this stuff, as you know, and I write about it extensively. So we have commonality there, and it's Zis v gold, sweet as gold. So thank you very much. Be matzliach, afreilich and purim, and we'll be in touch. Hatzlacha Rabbi. Thank you very much. You did a wonderful interview for us at Meaningful Interviews. Zeit gesund, Chabad, and a guten Tag. Bye.
Thank you.